At my birthday dinner, my millionaire daughter smirked and said, "Liking the allowance I give you?" Janet Lawson, retired teacher and mother for 42 years, set down her fork without a word. Rebecca, the little girl whose college I once paid for in full, sipped champagne like the bill was hers alone. By morning, the investment account she thought was hers to manage would be emptied into one with only my name on it. I'd been both provider and parent. Now I was the steward of my own wealth. And when her next transfer bounced, Rebecca finally learned whose allowance really kept coming. I'm curious, where in the world are you joining us from? Drop your city or country in the comments and make sure you're subscribed for all the latest updates. At my birthday dinner, my millionaire daughter smirked and said, "Liking the allowance I give you?" The candles on the table were low and golden, turning the polished silverware into ribbons of light. Around us, the hum of the restaurant was a soft mix of laughter and the clink of champagne flutes, an elegant chorus for an evening I'd been quietly looking forward to all week. Claire had chosen the place, of course, she always did. A rooftop dining room with glass walls and skyline views, the kind of place where the menu didn't have prices and the waiters wore watches more expensive than my car. She arrived in a fitted navy dress, her hair pulled into one of those effortless knots that only look effortless when you've had it done by someone else. A warm kiss on my cheek, a bouquet of white lilies, and for a moment, I forgot the faint ache I'd been carrying lately, the one that came from knowing our lives had grown so different, so far apart. The first course came, delicate as art on porcelain plates. We spoke about her latest project, the charity gala she'd hosted, the new wing being added to her office building. I smiled and nodded, proud in the way only a mother can be, even as part of me felt like an audience member rather than a participant in her world. It wasn't until the second glass of wine that her tone shifted. She leaned back, eyes glinting under the candlelight, and said casually as if she were commenting on the weather, "Liking the allowance I give you?" The word allowance landed like a stone dropped into still water, ripples spreading outward, disturbing the calm I'd been holding on to. I kept my face neutral, a reflex honed over years of swallowing my pride when the situation demanded it. I even managed a small laugh, though it came out more brittle than I intended. "You've been generous," I said, my voice softer than I wanted. She smiled, not the warm, affectionate smile I'd once known, but something cooler, edged with the satisfaction of someone who knows she's in control. I glanced at the other tables as if anyone might have overheard. No one had. But the humiliation burned all the same. In that moment, I felt the weight of every bill she'd quietly paid, every time she'd helped without asking first, and the way those moments had gradually shifted the ground beneath our relationship. Claire kept talking, her words as smooth as the wine she swirled in her glass, but I was no longer hearing her. My mind had already begun replaying every recent exchange, her little pauses before agreeing to help, the way she asked about my expenses in the same tone she might ask about the weather, the faint amusement in her eyes when I admitted something I couldn't afford. I'd told myself her success was something we both could be proud of. But sitting there, the city lights reflecting in the glass behind her, I began to wonder if she saw me less as a mother and more as a dependent. When dessert arrived, a tower of sponge sugar and delicate chocolate curls, I barely tasted it. Claire was animated now, recounting some victory in the boardroom, her hands moving as though she was still in the middle of the pit. I watched her the same way I might watch a stranger who reminded me of someone I once loved. Her phone buzzed, she glanced at it, smiled faintly at the screen, then slid it back into her clutch. I recognized that look, the look of someone with a dozen other priorities, all of them stacked higher than the person sitting across from her. I excused myself to the restroom, just to breathe without her eyes on me. The mirror caught my reflection, the careful makeup, the tasteful necklace, the small smile I'd been holding in place like a mask. When I returned, she was scanning the dessert menu again, as though she hadn't just made me question the foundation of our relationship. As we left the restaurant, her hand brushed mine in a gesture that might have once been comfort. This time, it felt like possession. Eleanor wonders if her daughter has been manipulating her all along. What kind of relationship is this? The tension between us was palpable. Was this the daughter I raised, or someone else entirely? The elevator whispering us down from the rooftop felt too quiet, too bright. I stared at our reflections in the mirrored walls, her polished, luminous me composed to the point of stiffness. She was texting someone, her mouth curved into a private smile. If I hadn't known better, I might have thought we were two strangers who'd happened to share a ride. Outside, the valet brought her car around like a stage cue. "I'll drop you," she said, not asked, already sliding into the driver's seat. The new leather smell was faintly nauseating. She drove the way she made decisions, quick, efficient, barely glancing in the rear view. I tried to talk about the lilies she brought, about the nice waiter who'd slipped me an extra candle, anything that fit the script of birthdays, soft and easy, but my words felt like watercolor on rain. She nodded at the right places and then asked if my internet had been fixed. The question landed oddly, specific, practical, a hook I didn't see until she tugged. "It was fine by the time I got home," I said. "Good," she replied, fingers tightening on the wheel. "It should be. I set you up with fiber. Auto bill." The tone casual final was a pebble starting an avalanche. "You did? It was overdue," she said lightly, as if we were discussing a potted plant that needed water. "You're welcome." My apartment building looked dim and tired when we pulled up, the lobby's fluorescent lighting casting everyone in a hospital pallor. She put the car in park and set a gift bag in my lap. The weight of it was reassuring until I saw the envelope on top, a sleek white slip with my electric company's logo peeking through. "Just a few things I took care of," she added, almost bored. "Things," I repeated, as if the word might sort itself into specific. "Power, internet, your dentist. Honestly, Mom, you've been juggling too much. Let me smooth it out." Her smile was warm enough to singe. "It's easier this way." Easier for whom sat between us like a third passenger. Upstairs, the hallway smelled faintly of stale carpet cleaner. I unlocked my door and she followed me in without waiting, flicking on lights, setting flowers in the sink as if she lived here. The gift bag looked absurdly festive on my kitchen table, nestled beside my stack of unopened mail. She plucked through the envelopes with quick, practiced fingers. "Don't," I started, but the word didn't grow teeth. She laughed. "You always were allergic to paperwork." Her phone buzzed again. She silenced it with a tap that made me flinch. Then, almost as an afterthought, "Oh, and the property tax thing? Handled. It's on my portal now." I stared at her, the way you stare at a painting and realize you've been admiring a forgery. "You never told me. You would have said no," she said, shrugging. "You do that. You make things harder than they need to be." I looked at the lilies in my sink, their white petals catching the overhead light like little flags. "It isn't harder," I said. "It's just mine." She leaned against the counter, arms folded, head tilted in that boardroom listening pose. "Mom, you hate asking for help. You always have. I'm not punishing you. I'm fixing things before they fall apart." I thought of decades of packing lunches at 5 a.m., working doubles, finding quarters in couch cushions for laundry, buying clearance gifts and making them look special. I thought of Claire's first apartment, the way I'd handed her a set of measuring spoons and said, "You can make anything with these and a good pan," and how she'd hug me like I was giving her a map. "Fixing and deciding aren't the same," I said. "Samantha," she smiled, light and merciless. "You needed the help. I provided it. That's what good daughters do." The words felt like a hand smoothing my hair the wrong way. She didn't see it, the small humiliations piled under all that polish. The way I'd learned to nod, to say thank you, to hide the sting, and how she'd learned to enjoy the nodding. She checked the time. "I have an early call." The cards on the table. "Spend it on something pretty, not groceries." A softened command disguised as care. I nodded, because that's what kept the evening from breaking in half. At the door she kissed my cheek and inhaled, like scenting a memory. "Happy birthday, Mom." After she left, the silence was so complete, I could hear the building settling, pipes ticking behind the walls, a neighbor's television murmuring through plaster. I set the gift bag aside, and opened the envelope she'd left. An elegant black card, with my name embossed. A note in her looping handwriting. "You're taken care of. Taken care of." Past tense. As if the decision had been made and stamped, as if I had signed something I hadn't read. I went to the sink and trimmed the lilies, arranging them in a glass pitcher, because I'd never owned a proper vase. Their scent lifted into the room, clean, confident, slightly overwhelming. I stood there for a long time, hands damp, staring at the flowers she'd brought and the card she'd pressed into my palm like a brand. Had she been rehearsing this quiet takeover for years? Had I been rehearsing my compliance? The clock over the stove ticked, steady as breath. I wiped water from the counter until the cloth came away dry, and the surface shone, my reflection wavered in it. A woman who had taught her daughter to be unstoppable, and hadn't noticed being edged out of her own life. If I confront her, will I lose her entirely? As the evening went on, I realized that something between us had shifted, and I wasn't sure I liked it. The next morning, sunlight slid through the blinds in thin, angled lines. I made coffee in the quiet kitchen, the black card sitting in the middle of the table like a dare. I could almost hear Claire's voice in it. Spend it. Don't think about it. I know better. I'd told myself after she left last night that I wouldn't dwell. Birthdays weren't supposed to spiral into suspicion, but the truth was, her words had lodged themselves under my skin, itchy and impossible to ignore. I called Ruth after breakfast. She'd known Claire since she was in pigtails. She asked you that? Just like that. Ruth's voice sharpened over the line. What was she trying to prove? That's just it, I said, staring at the flowers in the pitcher. It didn't feel like a joke. It felt like she was enjoying it. You've gotta be careful, Ruth warned. When money gets mixed with family, it changes things, sometimes permanently. Her words rang in my ears long after we hung up. That evening, I went to Claire's condo, sleek and high up, all glass and chrome, with a view of the city lights spilling out like jewels. She answered the door barefoot, wine glass in hand, her expression casual, but her eyes sharper than they looked. Twice in 1 week, she said with a smile. What's the occasion? Conversation, I said, without the theatrics of a birthday dinner. Her brows lifted. Theatrics? You know what I mean, I said, moving past her into the living room. It smelled faintly of lavender and something citrusy expensive. We sat across from each other, the glass coffee table between us like a sheet of ice. I tried to keep my tone neutral. You've been helping me a lot lately, more than I realized, and I'm wondering why. Her smile thinned. Do you want me to stop? That's not the point. The point is how it feels. How it feels. She leaned back. It feels like I'm making sure you have what you need. That's what it's supposed to feel like. Sometimes, I said carefully, it feels like you're keeping me in a position where I need you. Her gaze cooled. You really think I'm that manipulative? I think you like being in control, I said. For a moment she didn't answer. She swirled her wine, staring into the glass like the answer might be at the bottom. You've never been comfortable with me being the one who has more, she said finally. That's not true, I said, sharper than I meant to. I'm proud of you. I just don't want pride to feel like dependence. She laughed softly, but it wasn't amused. You're reading into things that aren't there. Maybe, I said. Or maybe you don't see it because you've always been on the other side of it. The air between us thickened, the kind that makes every word sound heavier. She stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, her back to me. Do you know how many people in my position cut their families off completely? She asked. Do you know how many of my colleagues have mothers they won't even take calls from? I could have chosen that. Instead, I make sure you're comfortable. The words stung, not for their truth, but for the suggestion underneath that comfort had strings, that gratitude was a payment. I didn't raise you to think of care as leverage, I said quietly. She turned, her silhouette framed by the glittering city beyond. And I didn't expect to have to raise my mother. The sentence hit harder than I let her see. I stood, picking up my bag from the sofa. Then maybe we need to talk less for a while. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't stop me. In the elevator down, my reflection stared back from the mirrored walls, chin high, eyes tired. I thought about the gap between us. It wasn't just about money. It was about the invisible wall that had been building brick by brick year by year, without me noticing until I was on the wrong side of it. Eleanor's heart races. What will Claire say when I finally speak up? The truth about Claire's intentions was starting to emerge, and it wasn't pretty. 2 days passed before Claire called. Her voice was brisk, businesslike. "We need to talk," she said. "Dinner, my place. Tomorrow at 7. It wasn't an invitation, it was a directive. And despite myself, I went. The condo was spotless as always, smelling faintly of vanilla and something sharper I couldn't place. A bottle of wine was already open on the counter, 2 glasses waiting. She poured before I could say no, her movements efficient, We sat at the dining table, the city glittering behind her like a set piece. For a few minutes we kept it light, her latest investment, a trip she was planning, the art piece she'd just bought. But I could feel the real conversation coiled between us, waiting to Finally I said, "The other night you said something that stuck with me." Her eyes flicked up from her glass. "About what?" "About you raising me," I said. "About taking care of me. About control." She didn't "Mom, you've always been independent, until you weren't. And when that happened, I stepped in." "I didn't ask you to step in this far," I said. Her voice cooled. "You think I'm doing this for fun? That I get some thrill out of paying your bills?" I hesitated. "Sometimes it feels like you enjoy knowing I need you." That's when she laughed, low, short, and without warmth. "I do like knowing I can make sure you don't screw things up." The words dropped between us, sharp and unapologetic. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You've made questionable choices. Financially, personally. Dad always said you were impulsive, and now that I've built something stable, why wouldn't I use it to keep you on track?" "On track," I repeated, "or in line." Her smile was small, deliberate, both. The room seemed to shrink. "You think you get to decide what's best for me?" "I know I do," she said. "You're better off this way. I've been handling your utilities, your property taxes, your insurance. You don't have to risk making mistakes." "And in return?" I asked. She tilted her head. "You live within the parameters I set. You don't make sudden moves without telling me. You don't wander off the rails." I sat back, absorbing the sting of every word. All those gifts over the last year weren't just kindness, they were ropes tying me to her version of my life. "Why not just say it, Claire?" I asked. "You want me dependent on you?" She didn't deny it. Her tone softened, but it was the kind of softness that made my skin prickle. "I don't want to see you struggle, Mom, and I don't trust you not to, without me there to guide things." The betrayal was almost physical. My own daughter, turning care into surveillance. "Do you have any idea what that feels like?" I asked. "To realize your child sees you as someone to manage instead of love?" "It feels," she said coolly, "like security. For her, maybe. For me it felt like a cage dressed in silk." We finished the wine in brittle silence. I didn't thank her for dinner when I left. The elevator ride down felt longer this time, the mirrored walls reflecting back someone I barely recognized, someone cornered in her own life. Claire confesses that her primary motivation for helping Eleanor has been to ensure she remains dependent on her. Walking home through the chilled evening air, I thought about every choice I'd made since Claire's first gift. How many of them had been truly mine? How many had I let her frame as help, until I couldn't tell the difference between gratitude and submission? The city's noise swelled and ebbed around me. Car horns, laughter, the distant hum of traffic, but all I could hear was her voice saying parameters I set. Eleanor feels a surge of anger. What kind of daughter does this to her mother? Everything I thought I knew about Claire was starting to unravel. Was I really just a pawn in her game? The next morning I woke before the sun. My apartment was still, the only sound the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the wall clock. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone lukewarm, staring at the black card Claire had given me. It wasn't a gift anymore. Not in my mind. It was a leash, sleek, understated, deceptively elegant, but a leash all the same. I thought back to moments I'd brushed off before. The time she insisted on paying my rent just for a few months, then quietly kept doing it until I stopped checking the statements. The afternoon she showed up with a new phone for me, already set up with her account login. The way she'd rearranged my living room while I was out, because it would work better this way. Each moment, taken alone, could have been an act of love. Together they formed a pattern I'd been too willing to ignore. I called Ruth. She answered with that sleepy rasp she'd never quite lost. "I need to tell you something," I said. By the time I finished, she was silent on the other end. "Then she told you she was keeping you in line?" "Her words, not mine," I said. "That's not just controlling," Ruth said. "That's rewriting your life so you fit in her version of it." I knew she was right, but hearing it aloud made my stomach knot. That evening I tried to eat dinner, but the food tasted like cardboard. The walls of my apartment seemed smaller, the air heavier. I caught myself glancing at the black card again as if it might explain itself. Instead, Claire's voice echoed in my mind, parameters I set. I'd taught her to walk, to talk, to stand up for herself. Somewhere along the way she'd learned how to stand over me instead. The phone rang. "Claire, I hope you're not still upset," she said. "I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. You're being a little dramatic, Mom." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. "You admitted you've been controlling me." "I said I've been helping you," she corrected, her tone clipped. "And if that keeps you from making bad choices, then yes, I'll keep doing it. You should be thanking me." "Thanking you." My voice came out sharper than I intended. "For turning my life into something you can manage like one of your accounts." She sighed, long and theatrical. "You've always been ungrateful. I give you freedom from stress and you call it control." Freedom. The word twisted in my chest. Was it freedom if every choice was approved before I made it? If I couldn't make a move without knowing she'd weigh in? "I've been more than grateful," I said, keeping my voice low. "I've been trapped." The silence that followed was taut enough to snap. "I can't talk to you when you're like this," she said finally. "Call me when you've calmed down." And she hung up. I sat there, the phone still warm against my cheek, staring at the lilies on the counter. They were beginning to droop, the edges of the petals curling inward. Even beauty wilts when it's cut from its roots. I wondered how much of me had been trimmed away to fit into Claire's version of my life. The truth was, I wasn't sure when I'd stopped being her mother and started being her project. Eleanor wonders if she can ever truly be free of Claire's grip. How do I get out of this? I had to make a choice, either stand up for myself or let Claire continue to control my life. By the third day, the air in my apartment felt different, charged, restless. The lilies in the pitcher had started to drop their petals, each one falling with a soft, papery sound that seemed louder in the silence. I couldn't stop replaying Claire's voice. Parameters I set. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't a sudden problem. It was the end of a long, slow erosion, one where I'd given up small pieces of myself in the name of peace. I called Ruth. "If I don't stop her now," I said, "this will be the rest of my life." "You've been letting her hold the wheel for too long," Ruth said. "It's time to take it back. Even if she doesn't like it." The words lodged in my chest. I knew she was right, but I also knew Claire wouldn't back down without a fight. That evening, I sent Claire a message. "We need to talk. My place. Tomorrow at 6. Her reply came fast. "I'll be there." When the knock came, I was already in the living room, hands folded, jaw set. Claire stepped in, wearing a tailored coat, and that faint scent of citrus and money. She took one look at my face and arched an eyebrow. "This feels serious," she said, slipping off her coat. "It is." She sat across from me, crossing one leg over the other, like she was settling in for a board meeting. "All right, Mom. What's on your mind?" "I'm not your puppet," I said. Her head tilted. "Excuse me? I know you've been making decisions for me, paying bills without asking, rearranging my life, keeping me in this box where I have to live by your rules. That ends now." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You're overreacting." "I'm not." My voice was steady. "You can't control me anymore." Something shifted in her expression, less surprise than disbelief. "You're really going to throw this back in my face after everything I've done for you?" "You mean everything you've done to me?" I said. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You wouldn't last a month without me covering for you. Do you even realize how much I've protected you from?" "Protected me, or made me depend?" She scoffed, but there was an edge of defensiveness now. "You've made mistakes before, Mom. Big ones. And I'm not going to let you repeat them." "This isn't about protecting me," I said. It's about you needing to be in control. Maybe that works in your office, but it doesn't work here. Not with me. Her cheeks flushed. You're being ridiculous. You can't just, yes, I cut in. I can. The room went still. I'm grateful for what you've done, I continued, but I'm done living in a life you manage like an asset. From now on, I'll make my own choices, even if they're messy, even if they're wrong. That's what living is. For a moment she just stared at me, as if she didn't recognize the woman sitting across from her. Then she let out a short, humorless laugh. You think you're ready for that kind of freedom? Be my guest. She stood, pulling her coat back on. Just don't come running when it blows up in your face. The door closed behind her with a sharp click. I sat in the quiet, my pulse still racing, the smell of her perfume lingering in the air like a reminder of the battle I'd just fought. It wasn't over, I knew that, but for the first time in a long time, I'd said no and meant it. Eleanor wonders how much more she'll have to fight to break free from Claire's emotional manipulation. Can I ever truly escape? As much as I fought back, I felt the gap between us growing wider, and this time, I didn't know how to fix it. Claire didn't call. Not the next day. Not the day after. The absence of her voice should have felt like relief, but instead it hung in the air like a storm that had passed too quickly, leaving the sky unsettled. The lilies were gone now. I'd thrown them out the morning after our fight. The pitcher sat empty on the counter, a hollow reminder of the night she'd handed me a gift and a leash in the same breath. I tried to fill the days. I walked to the park in the mornings, stopping for coffee at a place where no one knew me. I organized my pantry, something I'd been putting off for months. I even signed up for a watercolor workshop at the community center, but every quiet moment seemed to loop back to the same thought: she's not calling because she wants me to feel it. The absence wasn't accidental, it was punishment. When I did reach out, her replies were short. Busy this week. In a meeting. Can we talk later? Later never came. I caught myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Claire on her graduation day. Claire in the kitchen of her first apartment. Claire laughing so hard she doubled over. Somewhere in those frames was the daughter who used to call me for advice about everything, who once believed my word carried weight. Now I wasn't sure she saw me as anything more than a potential liability. One evening I called Ruth. She's freezing me out, I said. She's testing you, Ruth replied. She wants to see if you'll break and crawl back under her rules. I stared out the window at the empty street. And if I don't, then she has to decide whether she values control more than she values you. I tried to distract myself by focusing on small acts of independence, things I could own entirely. I baked a loaf of bread from scratch, the kitchen filling with the warm, yeasty smell. I rearranged the living room furniture to suit my own taste, not the minimalist flow she'd insisted on last year. It was strange how even these small choices felt like victory. I realized I'd been deferring to her opinions for so long, I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to just decide. Still, the silence between us widened. I wondered if I was supposed to be the one to bridge it. If not, reaching out again was just another way of proving her point. But every time I thought about calling, I remembered the look in her eyes during our last conversation. Not hurt, not confusion, just annoyance, like I was an obstacle to be managed. I didn't want to go back to being managed. One night as I lay in bed, my phone lit up. A message from Claire. Hope you're okay. That was it. No question mark. No invitation to reply. Just a small breadcrumb tossed into the gap. I stared at it for a long time, my fingers hovering over the screen. I could answer and make it easy for her. I could ask how she was and pretend the past 2 weeks hadn't happened. But the truth was I wasn't okay. Not with her terms, not with the silence she used as a tool. I set the phone down without responding. Eleanor contemplates a drastic decision. Am I ready to live without her in my life? The more I leaned into my own independence, the more I realized I could be free without her. It started with my mornings. No more waiting by the phone wondering if Claire would call or text. No more adjusting my day around the possibility of her needing me or deciding I needed her. Instead, I walked to the cafe down the block, ordered the same strong black coffee, and read the paper from front to back. The world kept moving whether Claire was in my life or not. And that thought was strangely liberating. I joined a book club at the library, At first it felt awkward, slipping into a circle of strangers who already had their rhythm, but within a week I was laughing over plot twists and swapping recipes with a retired teacher named Marlene. I began volunteering at the community thrift store, sorting donated clothes in the back room while listening to old jazz records on a dusty turntable. There was a kind of peace in folding sweaters, in knowing these small acts made someone else's life warmer. At home, I started painting again. My old easel had been gathering dust in the corner for years. The first strokes were clumsy, the colors muddied, but I didn't care. The act itself, choosing the shade of blue I wanted, deciding where it belonged, was enough to remind me that I still had choices. With each small decision, I could feel the outline of myself sharpening again. The woman I'd been before Claire's money became the air I breathed. When Claire did call, I answered, but I kept our conversations brief and polite. I didn't ask for anything. I didn't offer information she hadn't earned. "Everything okay?" she asked one Tuesday afternoon, her voice light but with that undercurrent of inspection I knew too well. "Everything's fine," I said, smiling into the phone as I wiped red paint from my fingers. "I've been busy." "With what?" "Oh, you know," I said. "Life." Her pause was small but noticeable. "Good," she said finally. "Glad to hear it." Ruth noticed the shift before I did. "You sound lighter," she said one evening over dinner. "I think I am," I told her. "It's not that I don't miss her. I just don't miss the way things were." "That's because you're starting to live on your terms again," Ruth said. "It changes everything." It did. Even the way I moved through my own space felt different. I rearranged my bedroom, traded the cold white bedding Claire had bought for a quilt I found at the thrift store. I filled my kitchen with the scent of cinnamon bread instead of the sleek, scentless air Claire thought looked expensive. None of it was dramatic, but all of it was mine. I knew Claire had noticed the difference. The clipped tone in her texts, the way she asked "what have you been up to," like she was checking for leaks in a dam, it was all there. But I didn't explain myself. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed her an answer. Eleanor wonders how much longer she can keep up the charade with Claire. How much longer will she try to control me? Just when I thought I was free, Claire dropped a bombshell that changed everything. It was a gray Wednesday afternoon when my phone lit up with her name. I almost didn't answer. Habit told me to brace for another subtle jab, but curiosity won. "Hi, Mom," she said. No sharpness, no smugness, just flat. "Hi," I replied, cautious. "Can we meet tonight?" I hesitated. "Everything all right?" Her pause was short but heavy. "Not exactly." We met at a small bistro halfway between our places. She wasn't in her usual immaculate armor, no tailored coat, no perfect hair. She wore a sweatshirt and jeans, her face bare, eyes shadowed like she hadn't slept. When the server left us with water, she leaned in. "I need your help." The words were so unexpected I almost laughed. "My help?" She nodded. "Financial help." I blinked. "You're asking me for money." She exhaled hard like she'd been holding it in all day. "I've hit a rough patch. Business deals went sideways, some investments tanked," and she broke off, shaking her head. "I don't have as much liquid cash as I thought I would. I need to cover some gaps." My mind tried to reconcile the image of her as a polished millionaire with the woman now sitting across from me, asking for help she'd once made me beg for in smaller ways. "What happened to all the security you bragged about?" I asked. "This isn't permanent," she said quickly. "It's just, I need something to keep me afloat while I re-strategize." I sipped my water slowly, buying time. "Why me?" Her mouth twisted. "Because I don't have anyone else I can trust." I should have felt flattered. I did. I felt the old pattern stirring, her setting the terms, me rushing to meet them. "Claire," I said carefully, "you've spent the past year making sure I stayed dependent on you, and now you're here, telling me you're the one who's dependent on me." Her jaw tightened. "That's not what I'm saying." "It's exactly what you're saying," I said. Her eyes flickered, the way they did when she wanted to be anywhere but in the truth. "I know I've been controlling. I thought I was protecting you. Maybe I was wrong, but right now I need your help." I sat back studying her. "And when you get back on your feet, Does this go back to you managing my life? She didn't answer right away. I can change, she said finally. If you want me to. The words landed like a fragile bridge between us, one I wasn't sure would hold weight. Major twist too. Claire admits that she has no one else to turn to, but Eleanor knows this could be another trap. I thought about the last few months, the space I'd carved out, the small joys I'd found that didn't need her approval. I thought about how easy it would be to hand her what she wanted and slip right back into the old rhythm. You have to understand, I said slowly. Help from me will come with boundaries. I won't be tied to you again. I can live with that, she said. But her voice carried the faintest waver. We parted with no decision made. Walking home, the streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement, stretching and warping like the shape of our relationship. Never quite steady, always shifting. The night air was cool against my skin, but my thoughts burned. Was this an opportunity to even the scales, or was it just another thread in the web she'd been spinning all along? Eleanor faces a hard decision. Do I give her what she wants, or do I continue breaking free? I had to make the hardest choice of all, whether to let go or offer Claire another chance. I didn't sleep much after that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the streetlight glow bleeding in through the blinds, my mind looping the same two questions. If I help her, am I inviting the old dynamic back? If I don't, will I lose her completely? By morning the air felt heavier. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed louder, like the apartment was holding its breath with me. I made tea instead of coffee, hoping the slower ritual would help me think. Pouring the steaming water into the cup, I remembered all the years I'd automatically said yes to Claire. No matter the cost to me, just to keep the peace. It wasn't peace though, it was surrender. I called Ruth. She needs help, I said. Ruth's tone was careful, like she knew there was a trap here. I could give it to her. I have enough saved to get her through this patch, but, I trailed off. But you're afraid she'll use it to pull you back in, Ruth finished. Exactly. Then help her on your terms, Ruth said. Not hers. Set the rules and stick to them. If she can't accept that, maybe she doesn't want your help, she wants your obedience. That thought followed me the rest of the day. By the time Claire arrived at my apartment that evening, dressed sharply again, her armor back in place, I knew what I was going to say. She sat on the couch without waiting to be invited. Have you decided? Yes, I said. I'll help you, but there are conditions. Her brow arched. Conditions? You'll pay me back with interest. We'll put it in writing. And this, I gestured between us, doesn't give you any say in my life. None. She gave a small dry laugh. Mom, I'm not going to start controlling you again. I held her gaze. You already have. And I won't go back to that. This is business. You can take it or leave it. Her smile faltered just enough for me to see the calculation behind it. Fine, she said finally. If that's what it takes. We worked out the amount, the repayment schedule, she signed the paper I typed up on my old laptop, the sound of the pen scratching across the page oddly satisfying. When she slid it back to me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a sense of being on equal footing. I appreciate this, she said, and for a moment it almost sounded genuine. I hope you do, I replied, because this is your last chance to show me you can respect me. She nodded, but her eyes didn't linger on mine for long. After she left, I sat at the table with the signed agreement in front of me. It was just paper, just ink, but it was also a line in the sand. Helping her didn't feel like surrender this time. It felt like a choice I owned. Still, in the quiet that followed, I couldn't ignore the flicker of doubt. I'd seen Claire adapt to rules before, only to find ways around them. If she tried again, I'd have to be ready. Eleanor feels a glimmer of hope. Can Claire truly with boundaries in place, I began to feel like I could finally breathe again. The first repayment came a week early. An envelope in my mailbox with my name written in Claire's handwriting, sharp, controlled, just like her voice when she was in business mode. Inside was a cashier's check and a short note. Thank you. I'm keeping my promise. I stared at the words longer than I should have, trying to read between the lines. Was it gratitude? A performance? Or maybe for the first time it was just what it looked like. In the weeks that followed, our conversations changed. They were shorter, lighter, No interrogations disguised as concern, no subtle reminders of what she'd done for me. One Tuesday afternoon, she called just to say she'd found a cafe she thought I'd like. "They have this lemon tart that's ridiculous," she said. "We should go sometime." It wasn't an order. It was an invitation. I accepted. The cafe was small, tucked into the corner of a quiet street, with mismatched chairs and the smell of baked sugar in the air. Claire didn't check her phone once. She asked about my painting classes, listened without redirecting the conversation back to herself. For the first time in years, we talked like two women, not like a benefactor and her dependent. At home I noticed a shift in myself too. I no longer hesitated before making decisions, wondering what Claire would think. I bought a second-hand armchair, because it was comfortable, not because it fit the aesthetic she preferred. I booked a weekend trip with Ruth, without feeling the need to run it past anyone. Every small choice built a little more space between the woman I'd been under her thumb and the woman I was becoming. One afternoon, I caught myself smiling for no reason, while folding laundry. It wasn't that my life was suddenly perfect. It was that I felt in control of it. Even the setbacks felt like mine to handle. Claire noticed too. "You seem lighter," she said over coffee one day. "I am," I replied. "I think it's because I finally know where I end and you begin." She didn't argue. She just nodded slowly, as if she understood. Of course I stayed cautious. I knew old patterns had a way of creeping back in when no one was watching. But each time Claire made a repayment, each time she respected a boundary, I allowed myself to believe a little more in the possibility of change. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was movement. Eleanor and Claire share a quiet moment, wondering what the future holds. Can we build a new, healthier relationship? Our relationship was evolving, but the true test was yet to come. It started with a text on a Thursday morning. "Need your opinion on something big. Can we meet?" For a moment my stomach tightened. Old reflex, but I told myself this wasn't the past. We were different now. I replied, "Come by tonight." She arrived in a dark green dress that looked like it belonged on the cover of a finance magazine, the kind of outfit you wore when you wanted to project control. But her eyes told a different story, bright but restless, scanning my apartment like she was already rehearsing her pitch. "I'm thinking about buying into a new venture," she said after the small talk ran dry. "It's risky, but the potential returns are massive." I listened. She laid out numbers, projections, names of people I'd never heard of. Somewhere between the talk of equity stakes and market positioning, I realized she wasn't just informing me, she was asking me to weigh in. "You've always had good instincts," she said, leaning forward. "Even when we've disagreed, you've seen things I didn't." It was strange hearing her admit that, almost unnerving. I took a slow sip of tea, and if my instinct says it's a bad idea, she smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Then I'll take it seriously. That's why I'm asking you." The old me might have jumped at the chance to be included, to feel relevant in her high-powered world, but the new me was wary. Advice could be a doorway. Once you stepped through, it was easy to find yourself back inside her machinery. After she left, I sat in the quiet, turning her words over. Was she trying to share her life with me, or was this another way to pull me closer, to tether me again? I called Ruth. She says she wants my input. Part of me thinks it's progress. The other part remembers who she's been, Ruth finished. Just make sure you're not walking into her boardroom without realizing it. The next afternoon, I gave Claire my answer. "It's your decision, Claire. I can tell you what I see, but I'm not going to own it for you." Her brow furrowed, but she didn't push. "All right. What do you see?" "It's risky," I said, "and you've been through enough uncertainty lately. I think you should wait." She nodded slowly, like she was filing it away. Noted. Weeks later she told me she'd gone ahead with it anyway, and it hadn't gone the way she'd hoped. The disappointment in her voice was muted, but I could feel it in the space between her sentences. I didn't say "I told you so." I didn't rescue her. I just listened. That night, as I rinsed dishes in the sink, I realized the difference. This time her mistake wasn't mine to fix, and she didn't try to make it mine. It was a small thing, but it felt like proof that maybe we were learning, both of us. Eleanor realizes the hardest part might be letting go of her fears. Am I finally ready to trust her? For the first time in years, things felt like they were finally falling into place. The shift wasn't dramatic, it crept in like a change of season. One day I realized I'd gone a full week without bracing myself before answering her calls. Our conversations were easier now. Some were as short as 5 minutes, just updates about work or a recipe she'd tried, or a movie I might like. Others stretched late into the night, wandering through stories about her childhood, my own memories, and even silences that didn't feel heavy anymore. I still guarded my independence. My mornings were mine, coffee in the little cafe, watercolors at the kitchen table, volunteering at the thrift store on Thursdays. When Claire called, I didn't drop everything to accommodate her. She noticed, but she didn't. I like that you have your own thing going, she said one afternoon. I think it's good for us. It was such a simple statement, but it carried weight. The old Claire wouldn't have said that. She'd have found a way to fold my time back into her own schedule. We started meeting once a week for lunch, sometimes at her favorite sleek restaurants, sometimes at diners where the waitress knew my order before I sat down. The balance felt natural. We took turns entering each other's worlds, neither dominating the other. One rainy Tuesday, she came to my place with a bag of groceries. I'm making dinner here, she said. Your kitchen's better than mine for pasta. I let her. We cooked together like we hadn't in years, moving easily around each other in the small space. No arguments about the right way to chop garlic. No subtle digs about the age of my cookware. Just two women making a meal. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes she'd still slip into a tone that made me feel 12 again, and sometimes I'd catch myself holding my breath, waiting for her to pivot into a power play. But when it happened, we noticed and we adjusted. One evening, after a lunch where she'd interrupted me 3 times, she called back later to apologize. I didn't mean to talk over you, she said. Old habits, I guess. Hearing her own admission without prompting told me we were in new territory. For the first time, I began to think that maybe we were building something lasting. Not because we'd erased the past, we both knew better than that, but because we'd learned to live with it without letting it run the present. One Saturday, sitting in the park with takeaway coffees, she looked at me and said, I know I wasn't easy to be around for a long time. I'm glad we're here now. I met her eyes, steady. Me too. And I meant. Eleanor feels a deep sense of pride, knowing that they've built something real. This is just the beginning. The past wasn't done with us yet. Claire dropped a bombshell that changed everything. It happened on an ordinary Wednesday. I was wiping down the kitchen counters when Claire called. Her voice had that buoyant lift it got when she was holding back something big. Are you free for dinner tonight? She asked. Depends, I said, smiling. Is this a social dinner or am I walking into a surprise board meeting? Social, she promised. And, I have something for you. We met at a small candlelit place she knew I liked, somewhere between casual and elegant, the kind of spot where conversation felt safe. She ordered wine for both of us before I'd even sat down. Halfway through the meal she reached into her bag and pulled out a thick envelope. She slid it across the table like it was contraband. What's this? I asked, eyeing it. Just open it. Inside was a sheaf of legal documents, neatly clipped together. My name appeared more than once, in bold. At first the language blurred. I thought it might be something about the loan I'd given her, but then I saw the numbers, and the words beneficiary, transfer of assets. I looked up. Claire, what is... She leaned back, smiling. Not smug, not sharp, but almost shy. It's part of my estate plan. You'll inherit a portion of my company shares, the house in Maine, and a trust that will pay out annually. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her right. Her smile faltered just enough to reveal the nerves underneath. Because I want to take care of you for real this time. No strings, no control. I don't want there to be any question about whether I value you. The words landed heavy. This was the kind of gesture most people would see as pure generosity, but for me it felt tangled. Like an echo of every time she'd used money to define the terms between us. I set the papers down. Claire, money isn't the problem. It's never been the problem. I know, she said quickly, but I want you to have this. Not as leverage, as a gift, as an apology. I studied her face, searching for the flicker of manipulation I'd learned to watch for. Maybe I was too guarded, but it was hard to see this without wondering what strings might appear later, invisible at first, but just as binding. I don't know if I can accept this, I said finally. Her eyes widened. Why not? Because if I do, I have to believe it's only about love, and I'm not sure I'm there yet. She looked like I'd taken the wind out of her. But she didn't argue. She just nodded, slowly as if she'd expected resistance. Then think about it. No rush. Krillent. Major twist. Nam. 3. Eleanor decides to refuse the money, choosing instead to heal on her own terms. Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table with the envelope in front of me. It wasn't just about wealth. It was about rewriting the balance between us. And I realized I didn't need her fortune to feel secure. I picked up the phone, called her, and said, Claire, I appreciate the gesture, but I can't accept it. What I want from you isn't something you can sign over in a legal document. Silence, then a quiet, okay, and that was it. No bargaining, no lecture. Just acceptance. Eleanor is left contemplating the future. Is this the moment of true reconciliation? The real gift wasn't the money, it was the understanding that we had both changed. We met for coffee a week later, no legal envelopes between us, no hidden agendas in the air. Just 2 women at a small table in the corner of a bustling cafe, the hiss of the espresso machine, and the low hum of conversation wrapping around us. Claire looked different, not in her clothes, still tailored, still deliberate, but in her eyes, softer, less on guard. I've been thinking about what you said, she began, about the money not being the problem. I waited, letting her find her words. You're right, she said finally. I thought I could fix things the same way I've handled every other problem in my life, by throwing resources at it. But that's not what this is. What we've been through, it's not a business transaction. For years I dreamed of hearing something like that. And now, sitting across from her, I didn't feel the triumph I'd expected. I just felt calm. I didn't want to insult you by refusing, I said. I just needed you to know I'm okay without it. That I'm okay without you managing my life. She gave a small, rueful smile. I think I needed to hear that even more than you needed to say it. We talked for over an hour, about work, about the book I was reading, about the thrift store and the painting class. She asked questions without steering them back to her. I listened without suspicion, letting her words just be words instead of coded moves in some ongoing game. Somewhere in the middle of the conversation, I realized the power imbalance that had once defined us was gone. Not because we'd erased it, but because we'd both learned to stop feeding it. Before we left, she reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. It wasn't a grand gesture, no audience, no performance. I want us to keep building this, she said, whatever it looks like. No more manipulation, no more games. I squeezed her hand. Me too. We walked out together into the crisp afternoon, the sun warming our faces as we crossed the street. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to watch my words or anticipate her next move. She was still Claire. Strong-willed, decisive, sometimes stubborn, but I wasn't the same Eleanor she'd once held so tightly in her grasp. And maybe that was the real change, not her surrendering control, but me no longer handing it over. That weekend, we spent Sunday afternoon, cooking in her kitchen. Music played from her phone, the scent of roasted garlic, filling the air. She didn't hover over me or critique the way I chopped vegetables. I didn't brace for it either. It was just easy. By evening, as we sat with plates in front of us, I realized we'd come to the end of something, and the start of something else entirely. Not the old dependency, not the constant tug of war, something balanced, quiet, and mutual. For the first time, I believed it could last. Eleanor reflects on their journey. We're finally ready to embrace what's ahead.